Swami Sananda, a 123-year-old man, stepped into Kolkata airport, instantly feeling overwhelmed by the vast, bustling terminal. Although he was remarkably spry for his age, the sheer size of the airport and the constant stream of hurried travelers made him feel small and disoriented. He clutched his carefully packed bag, embroidered with traditional Indian patterns, and glanced around, searching for a familiar sign or a helpful face. As he moved cautiously through the terminal, Swami attempted to ask passers-by for directions, but everyone was too absorbed in their own journeys to notice the elderly man struggling in their midst. Some barely acknowledged him, offering only hurried glances before rushing past, while others ignored him entirely, their eyes fixed on their phones or boarding passes. With every failed attempt, Swami felt an increasing sense of isolation, as if he were invisible in the sea of travelers. His heart pounded slightly, not from fear, but from the unsettling realization that, despite all his years of wisdom and experience, he was still vulnerable in moments like these. He sighed, tightening his grip on his bag, trying to steady himself. Just as frustration and loneliness threatened to take hold, a gentle tap on his shoulder made him turn around. A young woman stood before him, her warm smile filled with kindness. She tilted her head slightly and asked in a soft, polite voice if he needed help. Swami's eyes welled up with gratitude. He hadn't expected anyone to stop. Her expression reminded him of his granddaughter, whom he hadn't seen in years, and for the first time since arriving at the airport, he felt a sense of comfort. With a small, appreciative nod, he explained his predicament. The woman listened patiently, then checked the overhead screens before guiding him toward the correct counter. As they walked together, Swami felt a newfound reassurance. Though the airport remained vast and chaotic, the kindness of a stranger had lifted the weight of loneliness from his shoulders. As Swami Sananda reached the check-in counter, he carefully retrieved his passport from his bag, his fingers gently tracing the worn edges of the document that had accompanied him for decades. He handed it over to the airline staff with a calm, knowing smile, unaware that within moments, he would send shockwaves through the terminal. The young woman at the desk took the passport with routine efficiency, barely glancing at Swami as she flipped it open. But as soon as her eyes landed on the details inside, her casual demeanor vanished. Her brows furrowed, her fingers hesitated mid-motion, and she blinked rapidly as if trying to make sense of what she was seeing. A sharp intake of breath betrayed her disbelief, and she quickly turned to her colleague, nudging him with urgency. "Take a look at this," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. The older staff member, a seasoned professional who had seen thousands of passports over the years, leaned over, expecting nothing more than an odd formatting error or a missing stamp. But the moment his eyes scanned the page, his expression hardened in confusion. His fingers instinctively gripped the passport tighter, as if the document itself might slip away like a mirage. He glanced up at Swami, then back at the passport, then at Swami again. The photo inside the passport was what unsettled them the most. Instead of an elderly man with deep wrinkles and silvered hair, the image displayed a young man, perhaps in his early 30s, with sharp features, piercing eyes, and an air of calm confidence. The discrepancy was impossible to ignore. Then came the real shock. His date of birth, 1900. The realization struck like a bolt of lightning. The woman's lips parted slightly, her hands now gripping the edges of the passport as if holding something unreal. Her colleague swallowed hard, exchanging a quick, uncertain glance with her. "Sir," the older staff member finally spoke, his voice carefully measured, as if afraid to offend but unable to hide his disbelief. "This passport says you were born in 1900. He paused, searching for the right words. "That would make you 123 years old." Silence. The noise of the busy airport seemed to fade into the background as those within earshot turned their heads, curiosity flickering across their faces. Other employees, sensing something unusual, subtly stepped closer to see what was happening. A few passengers in the queue craned their necks, their interest piqued by the sudden change in the atmosphere. The young woman at the counter shook her head slightly, as if to clear her thoughts. This had to be a mistake. A clerical error. A misprint. No one, no one, could be 123 years old and still standing before them with such vitality. Her hands trembled slightly as she ran her fingers over the aged cover of the passport. It wasn't just old, it looked like a relic from another era, the type of document that belonged in a museum rather than in an active traveler's hands. The pages, though fragile, were authentic. The stamps, the visas, the markings, all legitimate. But how? The older employee, now fully invested in the mystery, cleared his throat. "Mr. Sananda, I need to verify this." His voice held an edge of formality now. His gaze flickered to his colleague, and with a subtle nod, she reached for the phone. Within moments, the quiet whispers turned into a hum of speculation as an airport security officer arrived, his uniform crisp, his expression unreadable. He took the passport, scanning it with an expert eye before pulling out a device to authenticate it. The seconds stretched unbearably long as he ran the passport through verification. The airline staff held their breath, exchanging nervous glances, waiting for what they assumed would be an obvious rejection. Then, the machine beeped. A green light. Authentic. The security officer's face shifted, his professionalism cracking just enough to reveal pure astonishment. He looked up at Swami, then back at the screen, then at the passport again, as if double-checking reality itself. This is real," he muttered under his breath. Gasps spread through the small crowd now forming around the counter. The murmurs of disbelief turned into hushed exclamations. People began whispering among themselves, sneaking glances at the serene old man who remained completely unbothered by the commotion surrounding him. Swami simply smiled, his wise eyes twinkling with amusement. He had lived long enough to know that surprises were often met with skepticism, but he had nothing to prove. As the reality of the situation settled in, the airport employees and passengers alike began to realize, this was not just another traveler. This was a man who had seemingly defied time itself, The atmosphere at the check-in counter had shifted. What had begun as a routine interaction had transformed into something far more unsettling. The young airline employee, still holding Swami Sananda's passport in her slightly trembling hands, could feel her pulse quicken. The old document looked authentic, its suede-like cover worn with time, its pages filled with official stamps from years of travel. And yet, the information inside made no sense. She swallowed, her throat dry, as she turned to her colleague, an older, more experienced airline worker. Her voice was barely a whisper. "This has to be a mistake, right?" The man took the passport from her hands and examined it carefully. His trained eyes scanned every detail, the name, the birth date, the photo. He had processed thousands of travelers in his career, seen all sorts of unusual cases, but this was something entirely different. Born, 1900. A chill ran down his spine. If this passport were accurate, the man standing before them was 123 years old, but that was impossible. His gaze flickered up towards Swami Sananda, who stood there, patiently observing them. There was no nervousness in his expression, no sign of deceit. Instead, there was something deeply unsettling about how calm he was, as if he had already anticipated their reaction. His eyes, deep and wise, held a kind of knowing, as if he had lived through generations and had nothing left to prove, The younger employee, now visibly shaken, reached for the phone. Her hands trembled slightly as she dialed. "Security, this is check-in counter B12. We have a passport discrepancy." "Yes, we need verification." She hesitated before adding, "It's urgent." Swami remained still, unfazed, while the two employees continued whispering among themselves. Behind him, a few passengers in line had noticed the commotion. A murmur rippled through the crowd as curious onlookers began craning their necks to see what was happening. Some even pulled out their phones, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. The minutes stretched unbearably long. Then, the sound of approaching footsteps, heavy, deliberate, cut through the growing tension. A uniformed security officer arrived, his sharp eyes surveying the scene. His expression was unreadable as he stopped in front of the counter, hands resting on his belt. "What seems to be the issue?" His voice was deep, authoritative. The older employee handed him the passport, his voice low and cautious. "This man is here to check in for his flight, but his date of birth states 1900. The officer's brow furrowed slightly, but his face remained impassive. Taking the document, he flipped it open and examined it closely. He scanned the pages, noting the travel history, the seals of different countries. Everything seemed in order, except for the absurdity of the man's supposed age. His eyes flicked up, studying Swami intently. The old man met his gaze with a peaceful smile, his posture relaxed. There was something unsettling about his demeanor, not because it was suspicious, but because it wasn't. He showed no panic, no anxiety, no attempt to defend himself. It was as if he had encountered this exact scenario before. The officer pulled out a handheld scanner, his grip firm. He had dealt with fake documents before, but something told him this wasn't an ordinary case. He ran the device over the passport's barcode. A soft beep sounded, the machine processing the data. The entire counter seemed to hold its breath. Then, ***, green light, ***. The officer's eyes widened just slightly. He checked the screen again, as if the device might have made an error. The passport was authentic. For the first time, a flicker of disbelief crossed his usually stoic face. He exchanged glances with the airline staff, who stared at him, waiting for an explanation, any explanation. But there was none. The document was real. Swami Sananda's identity was real. The murmurs in the background turned into hushed gasps. A few passengers whispered among themselves. Someone muttered, "Is he really 123 years old?" Another person, holding their phone, was already typing, likely posting the bizarre encounter online. The officer exhaled slowly, composing himself before speaking. His voice was quieter now, almost respectful. "Sir, I'm going to need to ask you a few questions." Swami nodded gently, the same warm, patient smile on his lips. "Of course," he replied, his voice carrying a quiet wisdom that sent a shiver down the young employee's spine. The officer gestured for him to follow. Swami moved without hesitation, his pace steady, unbothered by the growing number of eyes fixated on him. As he walked toward a private inspection area, the whispers followed him like echoes in a vast hall. Some stared in awe, others in confusion. But one thought was clear in everyone's mind. Had they just encountered a man who had defied time itself? Swami Sananda sat calmly in the private security room, his serene expression unchanged despite the hushed tension in the air. Across from him, 3 uniformed officers and 2 airport staff members stood together, exchanging puzzled glances as they flipped through the pages of his passport once more. Though their scanners had confirmed its authenticity, their minds still struggled to comprehend what they had just uncovered. 123 years old. The number loomed over them like an impossibility. The man before them should have been frail, bent with age, struggling to move, yet he sat upright, his body poised and composed. His skin, though lightly wrinkled, retained a smoothness that defied the passing of time. His hands, though aged, showed no signs of trembling. And most of all, his eyes, deep, steady, wise, held a sharpness that belonged to someone decades younger. The lead officer, a middle-aged man with a weathered face and years of experience, exhaled slowly. He had encountered countless unusual cases throughout his career, fake documents, travelers with suspicious backgrounds, even individuals attempting to smuggle things in the most unexpected ways. But never this. Clearing his throat, he finally spoke. "Mr. Sananda," he said, his voice carefully measured, "we've verified your passport. According to our system, everything checks out." His fingers drummed lightly against the table as he hesitated before continuing. "But if I may ask, how is this possible? You claim to be 123 years old, yet you appear to be, at most, in your 70s. A slight smile touched Swami's lips, his expression warm and knowing, as though he had anticipated this very question. He tilted his head slightly, observing the faces before him, curious, skeptical, and yet, beneath it all, fascinated. "I understand your confusion," he said, his voice calm and deep, carrying a sense of peace that settled over the room like a gentle breeze. "It is not the first time I have been asked this question." The younger officer, a woman in her early 30s, leaned forward slightly, curiosity evident in her sharp eyes. "Then what is the answer?" she pressed. "This isn't normal. Even the healthiest people in the world don't look like this at your age." Swami chuckled softly, the sound rich with amusement but devoid of arrogance. He folded his hands in his lap and regarded them with patience, like a teacher preparing to share a lesson. "I have lived simply," he began, his voice steady. "For more than a century, I have practiced yoga, meditation, and disciplined living. I have learned to listen to my body, what it needs, what it does not. I do not overindulge, nor do I poison it with things it does not require." The young officer frowned slightly. "You mean, diet and exercise?" Swami nodded. "Yes, but more than that. The body is merely a reflection of the mind. Stress, worry, anger, regret, these are the true causes of aging. Most people do not realize how much they carry. Every fear, every resentment, it wears them down, little by little, year by year." The older officer raised an eyebrow. "And you're saying you've avoided that?" Swami's gaze softened. "I have learned to let go," he said simply. "I have chosen not to chase after time, not to live in constant fear of what comes next. Most people rush through life, always looking forward or backward, never fully present. But when you truly live in the moment, time no longer holds power over you." A silence settled over the room, heavier than before. The officers exchanged glances. His words were simple, yet they carried a depth that made them question themselves. How much time had they spent worrying about deadlines, about things they could not change? How many sleepless nights had they endured, weighed down by stress? The young officer spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "But, this goes against everything science says about aging." Swami smiled, a glimmer of playfulness in his expression. "Perhaps science has not yet uncovered all the mysteries of the human mind." The lead officer sighed, rubbing his temples. He had started this questioning as a matter of protocol, but now, he felt more like a student in the presence of something, someone beyond his understanding. Finally, he leaned back, exhaling in surrender. "Well, Mr. Sananda," he said, shaking his head with a faint smile, "I don't know if I fully understand, but I do know one thing." Swami raised an eyebrow in silent inquiry. "You have a flight to catch." A chuckle spread through the room, breaking the lingering tension. The officers, still grappling with the mystery before them, gestured for him to stand. As he did, his movements were fluid, effortless, without the stiffness of old age. It was mesmerizing. As they walked him back toward the terminal, whispers spread like wildfire. Some travelers stared, murmuring among themselves. Others discreetly took photos, their fingers flying over their phone screens as the news began to spread. And by the time Swami Sananda reached his gate, the story of the ageless yogi had already begun its journey across the world. Swami Sananda stepped off the plane at London's Heathrow Airport with the same quiet grace that had defined his every movement. Yet, as soon as he entered the arrival terminal, he was met with a sight that even his years of wisdom and meditation had not prepared him for, a sea of people waiting for him, Reporters, photographers, and curious travelers had gathered in astonishing numbers. Flashing cameras illuminated his path, journalists spoke hurriedly into microphones, and strangers stared at him in awe. Some whispered among themselves, their eyes wide with disbelief, while others held up their phones, capturing videos of the man who had become an international mystery overnight. The noise was overwhelming, questions were being thrown from every direction. "Swami Sananda, is it true that you are 123 years old? What is the secret to your longevity? Are you proof that aging can be stopped? Can anyone achieve what you have?" Despite the chaos surrounding him, Swami remained calm, his expression did not waver, nor did his steps falter. The wrinkles on his face, though visible, did not carry the weight of a century. His body, though old, moved with the ease and agility of a man far younger. The energy around him was not that of an elderly man struggling with age, but of a being who had transcended time itself. As he walked, some people in the crowd bowed their heads in respect, recognizing something deeper in him, something beyond science and explanation. Others merely gawked, unable to reconcile what they were seeing with the reality they had always known. Could this man truly be as old as claimed? The story spreads like wildfire. Meanwhile, outside the airport, his story was dominating the world. News agencies across continents had picked up the viral reports from the Kolkata airport. Major television networks ran segments discussing his passport, his youthful appearance, and his history as a yogi. Experts debated the science of aging, spiritual leaders hailed him as proof of mind-body mastery, and skeptics scrambled to prove it was all an elaborate hoax. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #AgelessYogi, #123yearsyoung, and #EternalWisdom were trending worldwide. Videos of him walking through the airport, of stunned officers checking his documents, and of passengers whispering in astonishment circulated the internet. Some people laughed in disbelief, while others were deeply moved, wondering if perhaps the world had misunderstood the true potential of human longevity. People across the globe began questioning their own lives. Could stress, unhealthy living, and modern distractions be the real reason people age so quickly? If Swami had discovered a way to slow down time, was it something that could be learned? Doctors and scientists debated fiercely. Was there something in his biology that allowed him to defy time? Was it his strict yogic discipline? His controlled diet? His unwavering peace of mind? Could this man hold the key to a scientific breakthrough in the study of human aging? #The way to fame. As Swami Sananda continued walking through the terminal, he noticed how people reacted to him, some with reverence, others with curiosity, and a few with outright disbelief. The weight of their expectations was heavy, but he carried it as he carried everything else in life, with patience, understanding, and a quiet knowing that all things would pass. At one point, a young reporter broke through the crowd, her voice shaking with urgency. "Swami Sananda, please. Just one answer, what is your secret?" Swami paused. The crowd around him fell silent. He turned his head slowly, his eyes meeting hers, and for a moment, it felt as though time itself had stopped. There was no rush, no noise, just the stillness of a man who had lived through a century of change, war, peace, and progress. Then, with a gentle smile, he finally spoke. "The mind controls the body. If you free your mind, time will not control you." It was a simple sentence. Yet, as the words left his lips, they carried a depth that left the world speechless.